Hey, welcome to the second episode of this podcast, which still doesn't have a title. My name, again, is Lucas McNally. I used to be a crowdfunding consultant, and now we're going to try to figure out what the fuck is going on and what the fuck we're supposed to do as creatives in this rather stressful time. Last week we talked to Marty Lang. His campaign is at 25%. Which is a very good sign. It's on Seed and Spark, so go check that out. The link is in the comments or in the description there, or whatever it is. And so just to give you a sense of where we are, we're recording this. I'm recording this on Saturday from my house, Saturday, April 4th. They say that in weird times like this, you're supposed to sort of keep track of the changes. So yesterday or the day before, they said that the CDC said that we should start wearing masks out in public just to go to the grocery store or whatever, which is very weird. And so now my wife is working on making those, and the whole thing is very surreal. All right. So, but this week we're going to talk to Bri Castellini from Seed and Spark. She's the community fund manager, the film community manager there. It's one of the cooler crowdfunding platforms. And so without further ado, here's my discussion with Bri.
Okay, we're talking with Bri Castellini, who is speaking via Zoom, but with audio only. So she can't see how messy my office is, which is very helpful. Thanks for joining me, Bri. Bri is the Seed and Sparks Film Community Manager.
I am. And to be clear, you can't see how messy my bedroom is, but I can certainly see how messy your office is.
Oh, you can see
just
me.
Just because,
oh.
Yeah, I can see you. You just can't see me. That makes this a really fun energy where I know everything and you know nothing.
All right. That's good to know. So it's
important to establish power in the beginning of a podcast interview, and I feel like I'm winning so far, so I'm really happy about that.
I appreciate you telling me that, so I didn't like flip you off or anything,
I knew it was coming, but I wanted you to know that I could see when you inevitably flip me off at some point during this recording.
Emily has clearly told you about me, for I have a reputation. All right, so first of all, what is a film community manager? Let's just start with that.
That's a great question. So as far as I know, that title did not exist anywhere, certainly not at Seed and Spark. Essentially what it means is that in light of us starting to expand our crowdfunding to storytellers of all kinds, just because we are not focused on film anymore doesn't mean that film isn't still a huge part of our, community. So they brought me in to kind of continue to manage the film partnerships, outreach, and crowdfunding efforts as the other parts of the company started to expand and spend a little more effort on other kinds of storytellers. They needed somebody to kind of keep everyone who is already part of our community happy and moving forward and getting the resources they need. So like the day-to-day of my job is I do a lot of outreach to film schools and programs, to film organizations, and talk to them about offering educational opportunities to their membership, offering educational workshops and consultations to their membership. And I do half of all feedback on our platform. So anytime someone submits a campaign to Seed and Spark, somebody on the team, usually me, but also my colleague Brandy Payne, who is incredible. We go through every single campaign individually, section by section, and offer feedback. So I'm one of the two people who does that. I also teach classes sometimes. I teach our crowdfunding and art of the pitch workshops. Used to be in person, but now largely like this.
Not so much. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so that was, you hit like 4 things in my notes, which is nice. So part of it is you guys approve, so if you were to go, people are more familiar with Kickstarter, for example, or Indiegogo, you would go to Kickstarter, they the first time you do a campaign, they sort of vet you. And then after that, they're like, yeah, you know what's going on, so do whatever. So, but you guys, your process is a little different, where if I come to you with this project, then you guys go over it, right, with a pretty fine-tooth comb.
Yes, yeah. So there's a couple of different sections on the Seed and Spark campaign page, similar to Kickstarter and Indiegogo. I think we just have one like a half more sections than they do, and we go through each one of those sections: your pitch video, your wish list, which is what calculates your crowdfunding goal, your story section, the kind of big text section at the front, incentives, and inclusion statement. And we offer feedback and support and resources to help you strengthen each of those sections, so that by the time you launch, you have like the strongest possible materials on every level of your campaign. We also try to make sure that we are offering outreach support and like help with, you know, what your outreach plan is and strategy is, so that you're not like launching under the assumption that if you build it, they will come, which I think is the assumption that most people make, not just for crowdfunding, but also just for like marketing their filmmaking work and storytelling work in general. They're like, I have a great idea, people will love it. But it's just not that simple anymore. There's too much content out there. So that's also a big part of the feedback process, is especially once we know what their goal size is, how much money they're looking to raise, we can give them really actionable advice based on like what they need to accomplish that, and how we can help them set up like their schedule of events and their promotional materials and that kind of stuff to make sure that that is a realistic goal to reach.
So, okay, so if someone comes to you and they're like, I have no background and I have no Twitter presence and I have nothing, and I want to raise $500,000, which is when I was consulting, that I would get those emails, you know, and I'm like, and I would go, dude, that's not going to happen. I don't like, what do you do? What do you do with those people? You just say, do you just pretend you didn't get the email? Like, do you tell them to go pound sand?
Yeah, plausible deniability. We didn't see it. I don't know what you're talking about. No, so we respond to everyone who submits to our platform, and for the most part, people go through the full process with us. It's rare that people drop off once they've submitted, because like when we give them feedback, it's not like, this is bad, do it again. It's like, hey, these are the elements of this portion that could be better. For the question that you're asking, like the really high goal people who, based on what they've told us, don't really seem to have the audience or like background to raise that amount, what we do is we give them the feedback that we would give anyone else. You know, we go through their page and look at their materials, but then we also, at the top of their feedback that they get, give them kind of a breakdown of the statistics that we know to be true about like the size of your email list and social following versus your goal size. And so we give them like a formula that they can do themselves, so that they can see themselves like how they're stacking up based on the available data that we've gathered. And then we also say, you know, so like look through this, evaluate if this makes sense, and then if if you'd like to lower your goal, perhaps through raising in stages, so just raising for like pre-production or something right now, or perhaps like lowering your goal overall to see if you can make this project more cheaply, then feel free to resubmit and we'll continue the feedback process as normal. If you are still looking to raise this amount, you're going to need to submit to us an outreach plan. And so we give them some like sample questions that they need to answer as if they need like a place to start with this outreach plan. And usually those questions are like, how big is your team? How many people are actively crowdfunding with you? How big is your email list? How big is your social following total? What is your like marketing plan? Do you have like press contacts that you're reaching out to? Do you have live events planned? What platforms are you planning on focusing on? Like, what is your like practical plan to raise this money? And a lot of the times people don't even bother with that. They just immediately lower their goal. But the people who still want to raise that amount always, at least to the best of their abilities, try to answer those questions. And usually either they have like a secret weapon, like, oh, the producer's dad is like crazy rich and he's going to kick in whatever we don't raise ourselves. And it's like, all right, well, good for you. Congratulations on that.
That must be nice.
Must be nice to have generational wealth. But the other option is sometimes they push back, but when they send us their outreach plan, we can point out like how, like if they're focused entirely on social media, which is usually the thing, they're like, yeah, I have 1,000 Twitter followers. So, if all of them give $5 because, they're very engaged or whatever, like we'll have this much money. And we usually have to point out at that point, like the statistical conversion rate of social media share to crowdfunding contributions is 1%. So only 1% of your people are actually going to give you money from that. So focusing entirely on social media is not going to be an effective strategy from what we've seen in the past. So like we really try to, when they give us information, we try to give them context for that information that we have based on our existing data and like studies and that kind of stuff. And usually at that point, once we've opened a dialogue, once we really get them thinking about like what that's going to take, we can work with them on ways in which to still move forward with their project, because ultimately that's what we want, is like we want them to make this project. We just think that maybe the strategy around getting it made needs to tweak based on their current circumstances. But we try to impress upon them that if you focus on audience building, especially during your first campaign, and especially if you're planning on raising multiple times for the same project, that you can raise a little bit more each time and sort of build up to the amount that you ultimately want to raise, but without putting all of the pressure on a single campaign.
Sure. Okay, so you mentioned the social conversion rates. Before Seed and Spark was the thing, before it existed, and back, I think, when you were at Pacific University, which I learned by Googling you.
I'm very easy to Google,
yeah.
and I will say I love Pacific University, an excellent writing program.
Cool. So I had back in, gosh, it must have been like 2010 or 2011, something like that. I compiled, with some help from some other people, a database of like pretty much every film project on Kickstarter ever, above a certain threshold of like $1,000 or something.
Okay.
And the conversion rates were a lot different then, and I don't remember what they were, but I remember distinctly a Facebook fan back then was worth like $19. So
wow.
do you guys have like and I think that's gone down as the algorithms and as more grandmothers.
Yeah, especially on Facebook. Facebook algorithm is basically useless to anyone who isn't willing to pay to play. And when you're crowdfunding, it sort of doesn't make sense to pay a lot of money to try and get like a couple of people to give you money back. At best, you'll break even, and that's pretty rare.
Although I find Facebook advertising, because I direct road races, and Facebook advertising actually works really well for that, because you don't necessarily, it's not like the Boston Marathon, where you have to like, it's those races where you can just show up on the day and just, sort of jog it or whatever. And so it's just, you just direct it so that you're like, I don't really even care if you sign up for the race off of this link. I just want you to know the race exists, so that like 2 days before the race, when you look at the weather, you go, oh, it's going to be nice out on Saturday. I think I'll go.
Yeah, I've seen. Facebook paid posts are usually good for like marketing. Like if you want somebody to watch something or like rent a film, it's harder for crowdfunding though. People have a hard time buying into that because, ads are already so intrusive and people are pretty suspicious of them. So,
Yeah, and it works for that because it's just in your feed and then you just keep seeing it and you're like, oh, right. I was thinking of doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
and
what
for
are
crowdfunding, you really don't have to pay for that. Like if you can just be consistent and have really good materials, people will see and be reminded of your campaign regardless.
So what are the rates now? Like what are the conversion rates look like? Are they different by platform?
So we don't have, at least as far as I'm aware, like platform specific information, but we do have the stats like overall in terms of like, if you have a social following of whatever, the actual conversion rate of people seeing that post is going to still be 1%. I actually did the math for my last campaign. Because I ran a campaign a couple of weeks ago for a short film, and my conversion rate was 0.7% from social and 20% from my email list. And because I like really specifically tracked where every contribution, at least that I was bringing in, was coming from. And my unsurprisingly like highest hit rate in terms of social media was Twitter, followed by Instagram, because Twitter is sort of my home base for better or worse. But that's just because that's where I've cultivated my audience. So I think that like when you're planning your campaign, obviously don't ignore social media. Social media is a great place to remind people that you've sent them an email. It's also a good place for them to start to see the momentum, because it's been proven that you need to see something 3 times before you act on it. Especially, because everyone's in a different place in their day when they first get notification that like, hey, give me money. So if they keep seeing reminders, and those reminders are really like colorful and visually appealing and show off the momentum, like the campaign is doing well, then people will remember and go back to that email. But yeah, so when you're planning your social outreach, look at the platform that you use the most on your own and really focus in on making like the materials for that platform really great. And then like have like 1 or 2 posts a week go up everywhere else, but like really focus in on the one social media that you're going to get the most engagement from, and then pretty much completely otherwise focus on direct outreach via like email and direct messages, because what we've found, especially with like the inundation of content these days, the strategy is moving away from social media only because social media is so passive and there's so much else going on.
Right.
Email outreach is so direct and so personal that, you know, people don't engage with it passively. They have to click on it to read what's happening. And if you've done a good job with that, if you've made it very personalized and it's clear that it's coming from you and not like a mass BCC email, that is a lot more effective, because it's like it's mob psychology ultimately.
Right.
You know, if you're in an emergency situation and you happen to be in this crowd where something's going on and someone screams, "Someone call 911." You're like in the crowd, sure, but like your phone's dying and someone else will get it, I'm sure. But if somebody turns to you and says, "Hey, you, call 911," well, what are you going to do? Not call 911? Of course
Yeah,
not.
then you're an asshole who's not calling 911.
Exactly. You don't want to be an asshole in crowdfunding or crowd control. So that's kind of the metaphor that I use a lot to try and explain this to people, and that seems to be working out so far, because that's it. Like, and I know it from my own psychology. If I see somebody posting on social media, that's one thing, but if they send me an email, I'm like, "Oh, you know
Oh,
my
shit.
email? You remember I exist?
How did you
Ooh,
find
well,
me?
I better respond to." Exactly. Like, I have plausible deniability if I see it on my feed and I just like don't do anything about it. But like,
Yeah.
you email me, I no longer can hide behind my own cowardice and cheapness. I have to give you money now.
So one thing I always told people when I was consulting, because I'm sure you've noticed this, that everyone thinks, oh, I'm overwhelming people with this information, and everyone's sick of hearing about it. And I'm sure you've heard that with every single person you've talked to in your job.
Yes.
So the story I always told people is I had a feature that played. We talked our local multiplex into playing it for like a week. And so I was living in a different state, and I came home for it, and I promoted the hell out of it. And I was on the radio, and I was handing out flyers, and there were Facebook ads and Facebook posts, and like, I was convinced that every single human being in Mid-Coast Maine knew that this film was playing there and was tired of hearing about it already, you know? And I was sick of listening to myself talk, all this, whatever. So then I'm at the theater, you know, sort of like the second or third day it was there. I'm just there sort of hanging out. And a buddy of mine from school, and I went to a really small school, this buddy of mine who, whenever I come home, I hang out with him anyway. We like, you know, watch football and drink beer and whatever. He comes walking into the theater. And I'm like, oh, hey, I'll leave his name out. I'm like, hey, you came to see my movie. That's fantastic. He's like, you have a movie here? And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? And then he didn't even see the movie. He went to see some Russell Crowe thing, and I was like, just buy a ticket for my movie and go see I don't care. Just go see the Russell Crowe movie. I don't give a shit.
Oh man, that's
But
such
I
a
always
good
tell people
story.
that
I
I'm
was
like,
hoping that it would be like a nice ending, but no.
no, well, I bought a ticket, so it's a pretty nice ending. But you know, I mean, like, if that was the person who, you know, that's one of the like 10 people who I would have like expected to show up anyway and just knew about it even without me telling them. And he had no idea, didn't even know it existed.
Yeah, it's also worth noting that like it's the same way when you're like in a crowd and you're feeling self-conscious and
Mhm.
then you realize that like no one cares what you're doing, they're only thinking about themselves. It's sort of the same principle when it comes to
Yeah.
marketing. And the other thing that I usually try to tell filmmakers is that if your outreach feels annoying, something is wrong with your outreach. Talking about
Right.
your film should just be something you're excited to do. So if the materials that you're putting into the world are something that you'd be ashamed of someone seeing more than once, then you need to do something else. I try to emphasize, especially to people who are newer to the process, getting really creative with their materials and like thinking about like what got you into this project, what like made you so obsessed that you researched for 6 hours on a Saturday, what
Right.
was like the most fun part of putting this together. Put that kind of stuff front and center in your marketing, because when you're having fun marketing and just talking about your film, other people are going to have fun consuming that marketing, you know. And then also I try to get them to think about like when like media that you enjoy is marketing to you, what works for you, you know, what is it about their marketing efforts that appeal to you most? Like, do you like the sort of irreverent fast food people on Twitter? Like, do you like it when marketing is a little tongue in cheek, or do you like it when there's like really polished screenshots and a trailer and that kind of stuff? Like, whatever it is that appeals to you is likely going to appeal to your audience, because you're probably making something in a similar vein. So focus on that and make it fun. Just make it something that you're creating rather than something you're marketing. And that, I hope, is helping people out. They say it's helpful, but you know, I'm a very powerful presence, so they might just be lying to me to get me off the phone.
That could be it. Yeah. I always, that's kind of how I approach it in anything really. It's sort of, if you try to talk to every audience, you're going to get lost in it. You know, I always just think, well, what do I want to see in the world? And
yeah, you're your own best audience profile.
Yeah, I'm like, I figure there's enough people like me or similar to me that it's going to work out. I'm not trying to sell a Marvel movie here. You know, I don't have to hit all 4 quadrants.
Right. And also Marvel has, you know, unlimited resources when it comes to marketing, and not everyone who sees their marketing is going to see their movie, but they have enough money that they can kind of put it everywhere, and they know their audience is in there somewhere. But filmmakers don't have that kind of resources, and they certainly don't have that kind of time. So get really specific about the types of communities that you're going to be targeting with your advertising, whether it's paid or organic, and just focus on them, because those people who are like the most perfect people for your project are going to become your biggest amplifiers, because they're going to be like the core of the fandom, and that's what you're looking for, is somebody who's going to be the core of it. They're going to be the ones that kind of get more and more people invested, because you know that's what fandoms do best, is they go out into the world and spread the good word.
Yeah, one of the things I always used to tell people was that I never pushed for money in a campaign. I always pushed for backers or supporters or followers if it's on Seed and Spark, because you never know when the guy who gives you $1 is going to become like this disciple for you and go out and find like 15 other people who are each going to give $100. Do you find that still is a thing, or has that gone away?
I don't think that it's gone away. I think that it's harder now because there are so many more people asking for money, asking for eyeballs, asking for clicks. But it's definitely still a thing. And I try to emphasize to people to not undervalue their like lower level incentives, because there's often an instinct to say, well, if I'll just make an incentive at this level and they won't get anything, I'll just like put a thank you in there. But it's just like an option for the lower level people. And I think that that's a missed opportunity, because if you can get the people to give you like $1 to $10, like something fun that they can go out and share, they will feel more attached to your project and they'll feel more valued. And so the next time when they have more money, they'll remember how you treated them when they had less, and they'll give you more. And if you can make them feel like part of your team, that's a really powerful connection that you've just made. I always use the example of my last Seed and Spark campaign, not this most recent one. I was raising money for a comedy mental health web series, and it was a very prop gag heavy series. So our wish list, I broke down by the individual props, partially as a marketing thing, because it's like, what the hell are they going to use 150 Easter eggs for? You have to, watch the episodes to find out. But so this gave people the opportunity to sponsor a particular prop, which not only gave them the ability to like know tangibly where their money was going, so that when that episode came out, they could say, oh, I bought them those Easter eggs. But it also gave people a lot more varied price points in terms of how they could contribute. So there was a person on Twitter who had watched my work in the past and was like, I see your crowdfunding and I wish I could help, but I'm just so broke right now. And I was like, well, if you go to our wish list, there's actually a prop that we need to buy. It's a 3-foot like measuring tape thing that they're going to use for a thing in episode 3. It's $1. Do you have $1 to spare? And he's like, actually, I do have $1. Okay. So he purchased that item. And now that is a tangible thing that he can credit to himself. And so even though he only had $1, he purchased a prop. And when that episode came out, he shared it everywhere. Like, he was so excited to share with people, like, this is a funny episode, and I bought the measuring tape. For $1, I got someone who was now tangibly connected to the project and genuinely excited to share it, because I didn't belittle him for not being able to give money. I didn't talk down to him. I gave him a way to join the team, and that went a long way.
And you never know really where people are in their finances, especially now.
Totally.
And like sometimes like people just don't have $1 even. They don't have the $100 you think they should have. And sometimes the best they can do is be someone who like just tells everybody else about your campaign or about your project.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Um,
and on Seed and Spark, if you get a follower, following is free, but at certain tiers, you unlock a bunch of cool stuff. Like the film festival waivers at 500 followers is
mhm,
huge, and that
right.
can be up to $150 off of film festival submissions for you just by getting 500 people interested in your project enough to subscribe to your newsletter, essentially.
So you mentioned the wish list. So when I first heard about Seed and Spark, which was back in, I looked it up, it's 2013
Hmm.
at Sundance, which I think is they had just started. Um,
Yeah.
so the wish list was, I feel like it was more prominent back then, and it was like when I wrote the thing that you can still find in the Huffington Post, it was like, I have a C-stand, or I have gels, you can borrow them. Is that still a prominent thing on Seed and Spark? I don't really see it as, it doesn't feel like it's as front and center as it used to be. Do you guys
Yeah,
still
it's
have
definitely
that
still a
factor?
thing.
Okay.
The loan system. Yeah,
Hmm.
so that one thing that the loans I think are definitely less used now, just because so many people are crowdfunding, but it's certainly still a strategy that a lot of filmmakers employ. It's particularly useful as a strategy for people with a lot of filmmakers following them.
Right.
And people with strong like community-based support. So people who are from communities that are a little bit more specific than like New York City or
Hmm.
Los Angeles, like when people have like a local community that they're working with where they need like a couple of different locations or they need somebody to cook them lunch for Crafty for one day. Like the local community really comes through for like access and food, we found. And then filmmaking communities, people whose most of their network is other filmmakers, that's where like the equipment stuff comes through. So like we
Right.
need a C-stand, we need to a van to move stuff around, we need a lighting kit, stuff like that. And the people who are crowdfunding for those aspects have found that's very, very helpful. And I think one of the reasons that probably we're seeing a little bit less use of that system in particular is because more and more people are realizing that there's a lot of benefit to crowdfunding for like post production and like marketing and festivals, and those are
Hmm.
harder to accept loans on. Like my last
Right.
campaign was for like essentially finishing funds to pay ourselves back so that we could distribute the film finally. It had already gone through its festival submission period. We kind of just needed to pay ourselves back and have some kind of marketing stunt to get people aware of the film for when we finally put it online.
Hmm.
So we couldn't accept loans. Like literally we just needed the money, so loans didn't make sense. But
Right.
when people are doing pre-production still and production campaigns, that is definitely still a portion of their outreach is done to specifically people who they think could loan them something. Yeah,
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, that's more helpful if you're in, say, Austin, because
sure.
there's got to be C-stands just on the street corner somewhere. Than if you're in Montana, where they're like, I don't know what that is, but
Sure, but people in
I'll
Montana
cook you
have,
dinner.
houses. Yeah, exactly. They'll cook you dinner. Like a lot of, I've seen a lot of like parents when
Hmm.
they're like, I mean, we could write you a check, but like, what if we made you lunch for 3 of your shoot days, and like that's absolutely adequate, and the food's probably going to be better than what we were going to get for Crafty anyways.
Right. Or if we gave you a location, or
Exactly. Yeah,
your
locations are huge with your
your
local
cousin's
community. So
cabin. Sure.
yeah, there's a lakefront property. Blah blah blah.
Okay, so you mentioned that Seed and Spark is now, and this is, I think, pretty new. It's all sort of
As of
mediums.
2020.
Yeah, all mediums, and not just film. So, like, that's like comics or writing, like
Yeah,
board
audio
games.
plays. I think games is a category. We haven't seen
Hmm.
any, but I would love to talk to some board game people because I think we all could use some more board games these days.
Yeah.
Yeah, so podcasts, audio dramas, books, blogs, music, um, comic books. Like you said, we had a campaign run late last year that kind of launched our comic book vertical, a comic book by John Leguizamo, which was really cool.
Hmm.
And yeah, if you are a storyteller of any kind, or if you are a venue who hosts independent storytellers of any kind, we are open for business.
Cool. And so it's basically the same process. It's the same
Yes,
general system.
exactly the same. We know that parts of our product are going to have to get updated eventually
Hmm.
to accommodate people, and obviously our rewards are all still pretty exclusively for filmmakers. Although
Right.
I'm sure like theater spaces could find use in a couple of the things, but like on the base level, the platform can accommodate any kind of storyteller. And we are working right now on developing new educational resources to like speak to those sorts of people, because now we're
Sure.
starting to see campaigns submitted with people who aren't as familiar with video making. So obviously the pitch video advice that we give people, which is usually a lot of like filmmaker shaming, like, you're a filmmaker, why is your video so bad?
Oh my gosh,
that
yeah.
you know that can't really be the strategy anymore. So we're working on developing some new educational resources to sort of accommodate storytellers who aren't as familiar with that side of the process, and make sure that we're still giving them the best practices without having to expect that they have a filmmaking background.
Right. So is it, and it's not, so for some of those, like say for a podcast, for example, since we're on a podcast and you have a podcast and I apparently have one now, for me, I think Patreon makes a lot of sense for that sort of model. The subscription model, is that an available model or not an available model?
We do not have a subscription model yet.
That's what I thought.
We
Okay.
do have our streaming platform subscription, but that's just for people who want to distribute content with us.
Okay. I was just clearing that up. That's what I thought, but I wasn't sure.
Mhm.
So for the
But
pitch
who knows?
video,
Maybe someday.
maybe. I mean, I know I talked to Emily about it at some point, and she said Gumroad is, I think, developing a Patreon
Gumroad's a big partner of
competitor.
ours.
Yeah. So there. So the pitch video, back in the day, in the early days of Kickstarter, when it was a mess, and there was a lot of people who just would have a still or like a poster image or whatever of their campaign, and we're like, you got to have a video. But we found in the early days, at least, the more important than like, because you'd have two different types of videos. You'd have the pitch video where it's just a trailer, and then there's the pitch video where it's the filmmaker talking directly to the camera, going, "Give me money, please. Please, please, please give me money for the following reasons." And we found the second one, the more direct approach, was more effective. Is that still sort of?
Yeah, it's more of a combination now, especially on like the art and storytelling side, and especially on the filmmaking side. So the general advice we give for a pitch video is, first of all, it needs to be short. It needs to be about 120 seconds or less. And that's honestly more time than you think. And within that 120 seconds-ish, you need to show some kind of footage or visual, because when you're asking people to give you money to make something that they want to watch eventually, they need to see that you have the chops to do that, or at least have the vision to do that. So whether that's cutting together a sizzle reel of, Shutterstock footage, whether that's showing off past work, whether that's shooting kind of a rehearsal footage or something like that. Basically, we do need to see something. And straight up talking head is really not effective anymore, because there's so much other content to watch. Like, why would I watch a stranger that I've never seen before talk to me for 2 minutes in front of a white wall? So we found that starting with footage, kind of getting us into the scene, almost giving us a cold open to your pitch video. So like a portion of the trailer that you were talking about would be great there. Then, talking head for a little bit, cutaways to B-roll, maybe either to more footage or to like graphics and images, things that you put together for the campaign. But having like a steady talking head, like voiceover throughout, that has been the kind of effective model these days. And of course, the more creative people can get with the talking head, the better. There was a horror film that funded with us a couple of months ago, and their campaign video was they were in like a dark closet, and there was only like a flashlight that was lighting them up, and they did the pitch video as they were being like chased around the house and like hiding out in different sections of it, from like a mysterious thing. And like they had a lot of sound design and fun stuff, so it was pretty much just a talking head, but they showed off that they could move a camera around pretty well, that they understood like the tropes of horror, and it was just like a really entertaining video. So even though I was just getting the same exposition that I would get from anywhere, I got to see them like in their element. So ultimately, even though I knew nothing about these people, I know they could make a horror film. And I feel like I know a little bit more about like their sensibilities. And that was a really effective like use of that. So the more creative people can get with the talking head portion, which is direct and super important, but like the more stylistic it can get, the more people find that persuasive.
Yeah, I think the thing we used to tell people once we all sort of figured it out was, you have to show that you know what the hell you're doing and that you can do this. And then, but you also kind of on one level have to pass the, do I want to have a beer with this person test? Because
yeah, exactly.
Because like if you get up there and you could be like the greatest filmmaker in the world, but if then you get up there like Jared Kushner and start talking, I'd be like, no, fuck you, dude. No, I'm not giving you anything.
Yeah, the filmmaker's own credibility is a huge part of it. And that's why, like, there's sometimes people try to submit pitch videos where they're not on screen at all. There's just like
Mhm.
either a voiceover or just text. And it's like, nah, I don't know who this mysterious anonymous computer hacker is, but I need to see you. I
Yeah.
need to see who is making this film, even if it's for a little bit. We also know that people, especially when it's like a producer, director, writer who's crowdfunding, might not be like the most confident and comfortable person on camera. So something else we've seen people do is hire an actor either from the project or just that they know to play them in the video, and then they appear at some point and like make kind of an inside joke about like, the writer is here, but he doesn't want to be on camera. And so like he can write the words that he would want to say, but have like a more charismatic person perform it. And we've seen that that's been like a kind of fun subversion of the need to be on camera the whole time, especially if you're not as comfortable.
Do you think that's as effective as just being awkward on camera? Because for me, I would think that if I don't expect the writer or the director to be like, you know, Tom Hanks or anything. If they're like stumbling through it and they like are scared shitless to be on camera, I'm like, okay, yeah, I understand. This is the guy. I empathize with this guy more. Do you find that's
Well,
like
but you're
effective?
also like a person in this industry. For like a lay
Right.
person, we expect when somebody is on camera, I'm not a lay person anymore. I am a
Right.
special person. But like we expect there to be a certain level of competence and energy, and it's
Mhm.
hard to be confident in someone saying like, "Give me $10,000" if they're kind of stilted and uncomfortable on screen, and that's also going to hurt the pacing of the video, and people get
Right.
kind of caught up in the pacing of something, in the like, footage to speaking to footage. Like they want to feel empowered by the end. They want to feel excited. And if you are not a person who can conjure up that energy, you're just going to hurt the video. So it's better to just have a small portion of that and then focus on other things, or find ways where you're more comfortable, whether it's introducing yourself on camera and then going into voiceover, whatever. But like the performance aspect of it is definitely important.
Mhm.
Just because people don't expect you to be like a person on video. Every once in a while
Right.
that can work if you're like endearingly awkward, but for the most part, when somebody is filming themselves, they're not endearingly awkward, they're just awkward. And that can really work against people, because what we need is confidence in your credibility. And it's hard to be confident in someone who is just not selling it to us well. You can have the
Right.
greatest idea in the world, but if you are the driving force of the video and you are not compelling to watch, then that's going to be an uphill battle.
Unless you're like Charlie Kaufman and they're like, this guy's crazy, but also I've
Yeah,
already
exactly.
seen 3 movies where he's a genius, and so
Exactly. And
I
so
kind of
that is
want to
not
know
a
what's
movie.
wrong with him.
Exactly. That's why we try to emphasize, like, if you don't have footage from this work because you're crowdfunding to make this work, that makes sense. Show us what you've
Mhm.
done before, even if it's student films. Just pick like the best couple of shots. Show us
Yeah,
that you know what you're doing, and show us that you have credibility, and that goes a long, long way.
that solves a lot of problems. If you're like, well, this guy's already made a good movie, or this woman's already made a good movie, so they know what they're doing, and this is lower risk.
Hmm.
Okay, so let's talk about perks. So 100 years ago, when I had this big database of information, I found that the best performing perk in a campaign was always like 95% of the time was where the DVD was. Like
Interesting.
if you put the DVD at $5, that was your best perk. If you put the DVD at $50, that was your best perk. Um, but this was also like before streaming, before Netflix did streaming, and
Sure.
so that's how we all watched movies back in the dark ages. We had these small discs, and we carried them around with us from apartment to apartment as we moved. And I still have some of them. I have a whole bunch of them back here. Um, so where is, and part of what I always figured was that was the way that everyone sort of understood that they were going to be able to watch the movie. And so that's what they wanted. They're like, if I'm giving you money, I want to be able to watch the damn movie when you're done with it. Is that like, what's the most popular perk now? Is it the digital download? Is it streaming?
So it depends. We have found the most popular incentive is whatever's at the $25 level,
Okay.
and
Which is where the
in
DVD
order,
used to be usually.
sure, yeah. And so now usually people are putting like early streaming either at that level or just above. And it's usually like early streaming, so like that's how they can justify charging a little bit more, because
Right.
like, you know, you're going to get it before it's broadly available. And because like you mentioned, you know, physical copies are really, I haven't seen a physical copy offered more than like once every 30 campaigns, so it's
Of course.
really gone down in terms of popularity. But we found that the $25 incentive, whatever that is the most like sought after. And so the advice we try to give is, whatever that is, make sure that what you're delivering is instant. So we actually recommend not offering the copy of the film at that level, or at least not on its own, because that's really delayed gratification, and it
Right.
stops your ability to leverage their excitement over the reward that they got to find other people who will be excited. So the advice we try to give at that level is, make it instant, make it digital, make it personal, and make it visual. So something that can only be shared by this person because it either has their name on it or their face on it or something that they have commissioned. Make it digital so you don't have to pay to ship it to them. Make it instant so that you can send it out as soon as it happens, so that they can go out and share with their friends. And make it shareable so that like they want to go out and share it with their friends. So not only do they want to, but they can. And we found that that is a really good way of getting like the visuals of the campaign out into the world, and deputize people, even who might be strangers, to go share what they got with the world, even if they don't have a ton of context for you or your film. And the more on brand that reward is, the more people are going to come to understand like the tone and vision of your piece, just through like the reward that you're giving out. And you're capitalizing on people's excitement as it's happening. Merchandise has gone down in popularity just because it takes so long to be delivered, that like it's hard to attach the excitement over receiving it to the campaign and the project.
And
And
it's
so
a
you
pain
really
in the
want to
ass to
try and
make.
exactly. And it's a pain in the ass to do the logistics of, even if you're, you know, just sending out postcards. Like if you're giving out postcards for like a $10 level, sure, that's not very expensive for you to manufacture, but like the amount of time that you have to spend individually addressing postcards and like writing a handwritten note, that can take its toll. And you ultimately want to be spending your time after a campaign on the thing you were campaigning to fund, not delivering what was going on during the campaign itself. So the more digital and instant things you can send out, the more that you're containing the work of a crowdfunding campaign to the actual period of time that you're campaigning. And the more effective that's going to be, because people are excited while they can still be giving money.
Sure. What do you tell people when they're like, oh, and maybe people don't even do this anymore. They're like, oh, well, I don't want to give like people like the download of the movie or the streaming of the movie until they've spent like $30 or $40. Like, and like not even just early, like at all. Like, because they
Yeah,
think
I mean,
they
that's
think they're
fine.
gonna.
As long as access to the film is one of the incentives, you know, we kind of leave it up to the individual person. We get a little bit more concern around that from feature filmmakers, because they're worried about like affecting their distribution options.
Right.
But at this point in the film industry, as long as you're not offering a download, but you're just offering like streaming access, or even limited streaming access through, you know, a password protection, or you know, an unlisted link, something like that. Most distributors understand that crowdfunding is how a lot of independent films get made across platforms. So they're generally pretty lenient about that, as long as
Okay.
you as the filmmaker have the ability to revoke access. So that's why we recommend streaming over a digital download. If you're looking for, you know, future distribution options,
Sure.
in general, that shouldn't be a problem. Like as long as you can revoke it, and as long as it's not something where, you know, it's out for the public, it's just for backers, people, distributors and sales agents understand that process. So
Cool.
we try to, especially if people are concerned, we just say, just offer it as like, tell people that it's going to be limited access. You know, it'll be early access, but you know, they won't have it indefinitely. So as long as you make that transparent and clear up front, you should be transparent and in the clear with, you know, whatever distribution option you get.
Okay. So let's shift a little bit here. Actually, no, I have one more Seed the Spark question.
Sure.
So what we also found back in the day, and because you guys have the 80%, the green light,
Yep.
do you guys find that normally, at least in the Kickstarter database, we found that you would get to 100%, and so it was really easy to get a campaign from say 75% to 100% because sort of the snowball effect of it and the public pressure of holy shit, they're going to lose all this money. But then it would sort of stop. it would get to like 100%, and then it would sort of go a little over, and it would get to like 105%, and it would sort of really taper off unless you sort of blew past it and had a really great stretch goal. Do you guys find that people get to 80% and then pretty much stop, or do they end up keep going? And like, is the stretch as hard as it used to be? Maybe that's the question.
Not to 100%, because first of all, a lot of people who support a project on Seed and Spark don't really understand the green light and what that
Sure.
means. So like there's still, and like the meter, the little like progress meter on the campaign is still showing it's not complete, just like the color is green all of the sudden. So on that aspect, most supporters still see that there is a gap that they want to help fill. So like the 80 to 100 really is more about like giving the filmmakers like the chance to take a deep breath whenever that happens. But we've also found that being clear about stretch goals even ahead of the 80% has been an effective way of getting people, higher than 105%, as you mentioned. So making sure that you are being just really transparent about exactly where the money is going and what you could continue to do past that. We've seen people raise, 200% of their goal just because they were clear from the beginning and very consistent in their messaging about like what we're raising for 100% is the bare minimum. And that might not even be enough to make this as good as we want it to be. This is our passion. This is our vision for what we want. So if you can get us to this amount, we can do even more. And, it's all about transparency and it's all about communication. The people who are actively communicating with their audience, not just like the people outside of the campaign, but the people who have already given them money, the more likely they are to go even further than their initial goal, because people feel like they understand what the money is going for. It's not just this ethereal, like a film will be made, but like when it's really broken down for them via the wish list, via updates and that kind of stuff, via milestone updates, like we have now officially funded enough to get our second day of shooting, whatever it looks like. People respond to that. People respond to information.
Sure. Okay. So then I wanted to ask you about like, so now that this is all well and good, right? And then the world ended.
Yeah, sure
and
did.
It's a complete clusterfuck, and no one knows what the fuck is happening. And that's kind of why this podcast now exists, because I kind of wanted to figure out what the fuck is happening. And even though I don't even get to stop working, I have to keep working, but whatever. That's a whole different thing.
Hashtag relatable. Same here.
Yeah. So what are we doing now? Like you had a blog post about a creative residency in quarantine. I don't know if you want to talk about that any. But like, where do you see this going? Like this is obviously got to be the worst time in the world to crowdfund anything. Like this month of April when you. So like, but where do you see this going? Maybe out after 6 months from now, or a year from now, or whenever the vaccine shows up.
Yeah, man. So it's a lot. I happened to be crowdfunding as things were starting to bubble up. The final 2 weeks of my campaign were like the first weeks of the shelter-in-place order in Los Angeles. So that was certainly a transition. We still hit 101%, although we were raising a relatively small amount, but it was definitely an adjustment that we had to make in messaging, especially because we were raising for a psychological horror film about the dangers of capitalism.
Sure.
It turned out to be kind of prescient. Yeah, exactly. But also we had to kind of pull back from it, because our stylistic approach to the crowdfund was we were pretending that the crowdfund was itself a pyramid scheme, because the film's about like a demonic pyramid scheme. And so like we had all this messaging about like, join our community and you can rise through the ranks of not a pyramid, just a triangle shaped opportunity board. We kind of pulled back from that just because like it seemed like it wasn't a good strategy anymore to be like ironic about raising money. And we kind of doubled down on like, what is the money going towards? It's going towards paying back our collaborators. And like half of our collaborators on that project, which we shot a couple of years ago, had lost their jobs, or at the very least had gotten reduced hours as a result of the virus, so that it became a lot more about like the people behind the project and less about the project itself. And that's something that's the pivot that we've seen be most effective for crowdfunding campaigns during this like active apocalypse time,
Right.
is making it a lot more about the human beings behind the project, and the fact that, like, art is important, and so are the people who make it. So those of you who have turned to just like full on quarantine and chill with your Netflix and your Hulu and all that stuff, like, pay attention to who you're turning to. You're turning to artists to get you through this time. And these artists, for the most part, are out of work right now. So let us make art for you, and let us keep paying our rent so that we continue to do so even when we're out of this. So that has been definitely a pivot that's worked for a lot of people. We've also seen the making campaigns more about the audience than people usually do is effective as well, because we know that people are still paying for subscription streaming services and podcasts and podcast Patreon, so they get like additional like behind the scenes podcasts and stuff like that. Like, people are
Mhm.
paying for content. So if you can design your campaign around delivering more content to people, that is also an easy buy-in, and not just for the content that you're eventually going to make with the funds, but the content that you're making throughout the campaign. So producing new works, even if they're like small things, a poem a day, a short song snippet a day, a little TikTok sketch a day, or whatever it looks like for your particular campaign, that's something worth following, because it gives people something to look forward to throughout the course of your campaign. And it gives them like a tangible thing that they're buying right now. That's not just like, a digital postcard or whatever, but it's like something that they have to look forward to each and every day that has nothing to do with the insanity surrounding us. So the focusing on people, both behind the camera, who this campaign is going to support through these hard times, and the people on the other end, the audience, and what they're getting out of it, not just in the future, but right now. Those have been the effective pivots that we've seen on our platform, at least, that are allowing crowdfunding to still be a viable thing. And I would also say crowdfunding has gotten more popular, maybe not for filmmaking specifically, but like how many companies, how many events, how many venues have started up crowdfunding campaigns to support their memberships. Like, crowdfunding
Right.
is more important now than ever. And that's kind of why we wrote the artist in residency post that you mentioned. We wanted to design a concept for a crowdfunding campaign that could sort of speak to those, but make it a little bit more interactive and a little bit more creatively fulfilling for the people running it. Because, in the best of cases, crowdfunding is hard. And it's hard on your mental health to run, even when you're doing it great, even when you're designing it well. So we tried to focus and emphasize on like the creation of art, and focusing just on like your bills and utilities, and thinking about, if your bills were paid this month, what would you be working on? If you didn't have to worry about your finances, if you could cover rent, if you could cover expenses and utilities, your hot water stays on, what would you be working on right now? You're stuck inside, so you've got to be doing something. And why not give yourself the space to do that? If you were already thinking about launching some kind of crowdfunding campaign to cover those expenses because you're under or completely unemployed during this period, if we could help you set something like that up, what would you want to create? And so focus on making the story of this campaign like the creation of a little mini artist residency for yourself. And then also try to think about what sorts of things can you be offering your community during this time, during your residency, to keep them entertained as well. How can you create a community around art that you've already wanted to be making and cover your expenses at the same time? So that was kind of the inspiration for the artist in residency concept, which we have officially added, I believe, as a category on our site as
Cool.
of yesterday. So that was kind of the thinking there.
Could I use this to give you very detailed reviews of episodes of Blippi?
If you
Because
think that there is an audience for that, then by all means. I have a podcast about burn notice, so
I
like
know, yeah, but
there is an opportunity for
I have a
everyone.
3-year-old, and oh my god, it's so much Blippi right now.
Honestly, I think that would probably be really popular, because there's a lot of parents right now that are stuck at home with their kids while they're trying to work,
They're
and
watching
I think
Blippi,
that
yeah.
could really speak like the parental reviews of kids shows.
Yeah.
And like creating comedy and solidarity around that probably would be really popular.
I was telling somebody, I'm like, I ran into them at the grocery store, which is it's my social life these days. My once a week terrified grocery store experience. I'm like, like we're trying to, like, my wife and I, we're not really like, go out and do things types of people. We're very like stay at home, but the big difference is we can't drop all the children off at grandma's. Get rid of them for the night. They're just still there, and it's still Blippi time. And
I honestly would. I'm
I
not a
might lose
parent,
it.
but
Yeah.
I would love a deep dive, like true media criticism podcast about like children's television shows by an exhausted parent with their kids running around in the background. That sounds honestly like very funny and
That
very
would be,
interesting.
yeah, someone who like, I'm not going to do it because
Well, you have this podcast now. You're too busy.
yeah, I'm too busy with this and my day job. But I feel like someone who like majored in media, like media theory or something, and like maybe used to be like a film critic or something, but you know, now they're like 45 and they've got like 3 kids who are screaming at them all the time. I feel like that's their wheelhouse. So they could come to
Yeah.
you and say, here's what I want to do. I want to do deep dives like into the mise-en-scene of Pocono or
Bob the
whatever his
Builder.
name is, or
Yeah,
Bob the Builder,
exactly.
or those.
Is Bob the Builder still a thing? That was a thing when I was a kid.
Hey, there's a builder show. There's a builder show. My toddler is into, he calls them car shows, and it's just Hot Wheels, which are not Hot Wheels apparently because they're cold when you touch them. But that's a whole. That's a different thing. It's like these stupid videos where they like drive Hot Wheels around and they like change colors and then they like run into an elephant. The elephant is blue, and I don't.
Wow.
It's just, you watch it and go, what the fuck is this? Like.
Well, that is a free thing that we've just put out into the world. So any podcasters out there, you can take it from us.
Free idea.
Your heart's content.
Yeah, I don't even need credit. I'm not sure I want credit for that.
I'd rather my name get left out of this entirely, in fact.
Yeah. Okay, so I just want to ask you about one more thing.
Sure.
I read a couple of your blogs while watching Blippi, and one of the things
that was a surreal experience.
Oh yeah, one of the things that I thought was interesting is, so the follower system, which I've always kind of like had in the back of my head ever since I like first heard about you guys, and you mentioned something about how using it now when nobody has any money and everyone's waiting for their stimulus money to show up to sort of build your audience as like a preview. And feel free to like interrupt me if I'm selling this incorrectly. So say you've got a project and you want to sort of launch it whenever the world comes back.
Sure.
This idea of like having it in a preview mode and say like, okay, when the world comes back, or like on a day on July 1st or whatever, we're going to go live and we're going to sort of build up. Like, has anyone tried that yet?
Not yet, but I only wrote the post like a week ago.
Right.
I mean,
but it's not based on
do it
something someone else did or anything.
I mean, it's based on people doing stuff like on a smaller scale. Like there's the people who try to use their preview page as like a soft launch, just to start to gather a couple of followers. Like I did that for maybe 2 weeks before my last campaign. Just like, hey, it's my birthday. If you can just follow my Season Park campaign, it's free, and then you'll get alerted when it's there. But also, if you don't do anything else other than follow me, I still get a benefit from that. And we've seen people do that throughout the years, but during this time, we've seen a lot of people just hesitate even to start building a crowdfunding campaign because like the idea of launching it right now seems crazy to them, which is totally valid. And I was thinking about like, well, there's a lot you can do with a sample, like with a preview page, especially one that's like been vetted by us and approved and everything, to start getting the word out. And it also speaks to something that people do even in good times that I think is a mistake, which is they come out of nowhere. Like they don't understand that hyping up a crowdfunding campaign that's as important as hyping up a new film project, which they also sometimes drop out of nowhere. Like if you all of a sudden are crowdfunding, I had no idea you were even working on a new project, like I'm already behind. And so, even if I end up contributing, like there's not as many people who are going to be excited and who are expecting this and who are like, oh yeah, this project sounds great. You've already lost a lot of like lead up time to get people excited about the concept. Because ultimately all a crowdfunding campaign is a marketing campaign where you're also happening to be fundraising.
Well,
So,
I think part of that is people are afraid that they're going to blow their load on
exactly
on a time frame where you can't give them any money. I think that's part of where that hesitancy comes from.
And the hesitancy like that you just mentioned is also coming from like they're not really understanding how marketing works, which is fair because marketing is terrible. And everyone hates doing it.
Yeah.
But if you are thinking about it like strategically, and you're actually doing pre-production for that marketing, the, you know, quote unquote blowing of your load is not how that works. It's actually effective to get people to start like paying attention to something before it's available. You
Right.
just need to make sure that you can maintain that momentum. So that's why like the post that I wrote was all about using the follower system to start sending out updates. So you're not just having them follow a dead page and then, you know, in 6 months you'll launch it. Like you can submit, and I had to test this myself because I didn't know that it was actually possible, but it is. You can send updates before to followers, that followers will get emailed in their inbox like a newsletter before you launch the campaign. So I was trying to get people to think about this as like a newsletter subscription for their new project. And so during the period of time where they're trying to kind of test the waters, see where everyone's at financially, just using that time to just talk about the project. So don't even use it to talk about the crowdfunding campaign necessarily, or maybe offer up like, hey, we're still working on the design for our $25 incentive. Like, do you guys like this template or this template? So just start giving people things to contribute to. Start sharing like, hey, we did some edits on the script today. I wanted to share like a short part of our Zoom table read. Or we started doing, you know, wardrobe tests today. Here is a fashion show in our lead actor's home of like some of the outfit options we were thinking for their character. Like
Location
just start giving
scouts,
them
stuff like that.
Exactly. You know, right now nobody is in here, but just imagine that it's bustling. This is going to be a great shot for us, stuff like that. You know, so like give people a sense of like the progress that you're making even before you start launching, and people will start talking about your film. And as you are talking about it, they're starting to get excited, especially because you're showing them that like, hey, the world is crazy right now, but we're still moving forward. And so, you know, but not only are you getting them kind of excited about the project and giving them just something to think about other than the apocalypse. Maybe if you're making an apocalypse show, it's your apocalypse they're thinking of. And, you know, that's a step forward in some ways, but you're also training them to check on your crowdfunding campaign page for new updates. You're training them to go to this very specific link to learn more about this project that you've gotten them excited about. So once you do launch your campaign page, it's not coming out of nowhere. They're familiar with the site, they're familiar with the project, and like hopefully if you've done a good job, you kind of already soft pitched them on it. And if they got to be a part of building the incentive levels or designing the incentives and things like that, then you have done a lot of the work that you had to do way ahead of time. And it's always better to start with a like, you know, groundswell of support than, you know, starting from scratch.
Especially if you already know what your date is. If you know like July 1st is what we're going live, and you can sort of hype that day. Well, the old move was that Seth Godin sort of stumbled on, and then we all stole, was you pre-sell a bunch of it, and you get as much money in advance as you can lined up. And then what we would do was we would always launch the campaign. We would tell people it was launching at like 9 a.m. on a Monday, because we always launched on Monday mornings. But then we would turn it on at like 12:01 in the morning.
Yep.
And then we would tell people, we'd say have 15 people. And we would say, okay, so we're going to, at 12:01 in the morning, we're going to turn on, go on, back it, so that when people get there at 9 a.m., they're like, holy shit, they're already at $6,000. This is amazing.
Yep.
As opposed to, you know, you never wanted someone like that you didn't already know to go on there and be like, oh, they've raised $5 and they've been live for 4 hours. I don't think this is going to work.
Yeah, this is what I'm pitching is like the follower method is like the cloud launch. And then what you're talking about is like the soft launch method, which I definitely still do as well, because no one, like the way that crowdfunding campaigns are designed, nobody can tell the date at which it was launched. They just see how long it is until it's over. So if you launch like a day ahead of time or something and just get like your ride or dies to get in early, you know, people aren't noticing like, oh, they've actually been live for longer. Like people only consider, you know, your campaign started when they first saw it. And that's also why I recommend when people are like scheduling out like their outreach to not email everyone on the first day, because you know, not all of your list are going to be people that you're sure about. So I try to break it up by like, I email like our core supporters first, the people I know almost absolutely are going to definitely give us money, or people that I've lined up in advance, like you mentioned. Then the second day, I, reach out to people who I think will probably be amused by it, or, that I'm close to personally, even if they don't know a ton about my work. Then the third day is like old coworkers, people who, might throw me some bucks because they're like, oh, she's doing well. That's good for her. And then, the further out I get from the day, not only do I have new people to email that I haven't emailed yet, which just keeps me from going insane, because I
Sure.
struggle from like just sitting there during an hour, like, I should be doing something for my crowdfunding campaign. So having new emails to send out every day, like, gives me something to do. But it also ensures that the people that you're less sure about are seeing the campaign at a more successful place each time that they get reached out to, and they're not being inundated from the beginning. So for those people that we talked about like 45 minutes ago who are worried about being irritating, you aren't irritating if somebody hasn't heard from you for like the first week. And so that not only gives you like distance from possibly inundating someone with information, but you're also ensuring that the people that you're less sure about, that you're less confident in, are seeing your campaign at the best possible moment for them.
Okay, that makes sense. Although you used to be able to know when campaigns were launched. That was in the early days.
Oh,
That was
really?
a thing. That was part of the information. So you would go, oh, it was
Interesting.
launched. It would tell you what it would be like. It was launched yesterday.
Maybe that's just a Season Spark thing then, because I've been
I think
crowdfunding
that was
on
a
Season
I
Spark
think that was a
exclusively
Kickstarter
for like 3 years.
Indiegogo thing. I think.
Yeah. See, I used Indiegogo twice in like 2015 and 2016, but I will admit I have not looked closely at their platform in a while.
I have issues with Indiegogo. So many.
I also have issues with Indiegogo. However, Indiegogo has an excellent app, which I definitely
Oh,
miss.
do they?
Like Season Spark has mobile, so like you can do, I'm pretty sure, everything on our site mobily,
Right.
but it's just a mobile version of the website. And I know app development is like a huge time suck and money suck. So
Right.
there's a reason we don't have one, but that was something I always liked about Indiegogo.
Indiegogo has fraud issues. At least I don't know. It might
Interesting.
not anymore, because like a long time
So
ago.
does Zoom.
Well, yeah. But they used to have an issue where, so I had like a campaign that I worked on that was crazy successful because it was just a product. It was one of those product ones that just took off,
Sure.
And so someone launched a duplicate campaign on Indiegogo and got like $5,000. And
Oh, wow. They
and
just
we
like
couldn't.
ripped off your Kickstarter?
Yeah, they just stole $5,000 from people, and we couldn't get them to shut it down. It took a long time to get them to shut it down, and then they wouldn't give us the information of who actually got duped into this campaign. So we couldn't then contact them and be like, hey, you're not getting the thing that you think you're getting.
Oh, that's too
Go
bad.
over here instead, get a refund from these people. And it was a whole mess. So then I did a test where and my publisher wouldn't let me publish it. So I probably shouldn't even tell you about it, but whatever, fuck it. Where I pretended to be their head of security, and I created a fake account for a campaign for nothing. The campaign was literally called "Do Not Give This Any Money," ever, under any circumstances. And it went live, and they let it go live. They approved it.
Yeah, I don't think Indiegogo has oversight.
They have
I think
no
you can just launch
oversight.
whenever you want.
They have no oversight at all, and it was ridiculous. And we had been emailing this person, and I literally used this person's email address and like name to create an account on Indiegogo. And we discovered that it was easier to create a fraudulent account on Indiegogo than it was to comment on Pornhub. Because on Pornhub, they actually you have to verify. I don't know a
Your
lot
email
about
address?
commenting on Pornhub, but you had to verify your email address. And
And you don't have to do that on Indiegogo?
No, at least you didn't back then.
That's hilarious and terrifying.
Yeah, it's really terrifying. So I've never consulted on an Indiegogo
Recommend.
campaign. I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. If you want to go on Indiegogo, find somebody else.
Yeah, Indiegogo also just has the baggage of flexible funding, which like artists love because it's zero risk for them, and audiences hate because you're putting all of the risk on your supporters, and that is not a good method. Even if you're not using the flexible funding option, which I've seen people do the all or nothing campaigns on Indiegogo, but that's not what people associate with Indiegogo. So even if you're not using them for flexible funding, what are you using Indiegogo for? And that assumption makes audiences, especially strangers, which allegedly all these filmmakers want to contribute to their campaign outside of just like friends and family. A stranger's not going to give you money if you can get it, even if you can only raise 5% of your budget. I don't want to just give you $20 for no reason that you're going to keep, regardless of if you're going to give me this awesome sci-fi film you promised me.
Fun fact, they announced that they were doing adding an all or nothing model to shut me up in a panel discussion.
Really?
When they announced it. We were doing a
How long
panel
ago was
thing.
that? That was like,
oh, so long ago. It was when I was in LA for probably was like 2012, maybe 2011, something like that.
okay.
And that's when they announced it, because one of their people was going to be in a panel discussion with me and a couple other people, and it was like, I think it might have been live streamed or something, and they were like, Lucas is going to hammer us for this. So they were like, well, that's when they announced it. In panel discussion, and I was like,
wow, what power you wield.
It was weird. I was like, that's great, but it's still a fucking terrible model. Like,
yeah, exactly. Like, that's the thing about it, is that even if someone's like, oh no, I'm just going to use Indiegogo, but use like the regular fund, I'm like, then why are you going with Indiegogo?
Yeah, then,
like the only thing that Indiegogo has over anyone else is flexible funding, and flexible funding objectively is not good. Exactly.
Yeah, and I'd always tell people, like, if I say to you guys, say I need $50,000 to make the sci-fi movie, and then I raise $1,000, I still have to come up with a $50,000 sci-fi movie. Like,
exactly.
Or
and that's always going to be fraudulent. That's always going to be bad.
Yeah,
for
it's not
audiences.
a good situation for anybody. It's really bad. All right, so enough of that. I think we've been talking for like over an hour, so we should probably let you go and get back to your life. Do you have anything else you want to add? Anything you want to pitch for Seed and Spark?
No,
or
I mean,
for yourself, or for
I hope
your new Blippi podcast?
My new Blippi podcast, yes. Where I just interview exhausted parents over the phone as their toddlers scream in the background about their toddler's favorite TV show.
Ship them some wine first, and then
and I use the crowdfunding campaign to pay for the wine delivery.
Yeah,
like that's all, because I already have all my equipment. I've got my hosting sorted out. I just need to spend money on wine.
Yeah, and you definitely want video for that, because then you want them to be like, oh my god, just make it stop.
See, the problem right now is that I'm liking this idea more, and I don't have time to do it. Don't do this to me. I hope that the pitch that we have just made is enough for someone else to take it off my hands, because I absolutely want it to exist. I just do not want to be involved in it. I hate editing podcasts already, so I would rather not add another one to my plate. I obviously would recommend Seed and Spark for storytellers of all kinds to fundraise, and I was recommending Seed and Exactly. But also I was recommending Seed and Spark before I worked for Seed and Spark, because I worked for a different startup company prior to this that had like some overlapping with Seed and Spark. And so I had interviewed a lot of them. I knew Emily before I started working for the team. And my experience with crowdfunding has taken a true 180 since I started doing it with Seed and Spark, because like I mentioned, I'd done it on Indiegogo a couple of times, hated it, never made any money, was just like such an exhausting and like frustrating experience. And the first time I ran one on Seed and Spark, like just getting the email from my campaign specialist that was like, hey, I really liked your project. Here are a couple of things I think you can improve, but like these are parts that I really enjoyed. I was like, holy shit, someone's paying attention, and they're actually like giving me advice. Like it's not just it was incredible. And it wasn't just advice, like they were explaining why they were giving me the feedback. And so that also went to help me be a more confident crowdfunder, because I understood why things were the way they were. I understood why a video should be X amount of time long. I understood why I needed to be in it. I understood like the benefit of incentives and why I shouldn't be offering a printed signed poster for $15. And somebody was talking to me like I was a person. Yep, it definitely was. I ended up losing money on my incentives the first time I ran a campaign, because I like didn't understand how that worked, nor did I understand that you'd had to buy individual poster tubes to ship them out to people, and poster tubes cost $5.99. Just pro tip for everyone out there. But like it made me feel not only like I was learning something and that I had more control than I thought I did over my crowdfunding process, but it also made me enjoy the process more, because I understood the purpose of it outside of fundraising, because fundraising sucks. But audience building can be kind of fun because
Right.
it allows you to be creative and it allows you to build people who love your work. And I am an insane narcissist. And so meeting more people that like my work is really validating to me. And learning that I could do that and raise money at the same time was absolutely groundbreaking. And so like I recommend Seed and Spark because we're going to treat you like a person and we're going to treat you with respect, and we're not going to put you in a position where you're launching with no information. We are truly trying to set you up for success, and we want you to be successful. And we have the data and resources to give you the best possible opportunity for that. So hopefully you hit us up.
And what is the campaign success rate now? Because I know it used to be very high. I don't know if it's gone up or down.
Yeah, it's still it's between 80 and 82%. It kind of vacillates depending on the month, but yep, still at 82%, and that's because of our personalized feedback. Because
Right.
you know, when you look at a campaign, even like the wildly successful ones on our platform, and look at what they looked like when they first were submitted for feedback, it's a world of difference.
And part of it is you just don't have all those like weird ass campaigns that Kickstarter and Indiegogo have, where you look at them, you're like, this has no chance in hell.
Right, exactly. Because somebody on our team, some of the time me, has to manually approve you. Like I have to say, I believe in you, and I believe that you have done the work that you needed to accomplish this. Because like when we take longer in feedback with people, like we've had people ask questions like, how often do you reject people? And we're like, we never reject anyone. Usually what happens if somebody chooses not to launch with us, it's because they have decided not to follow our advice. They launch elsewhere, and 90% of those campaigns are not successful because we're blocking them from launching for a reason. And it's because we want this project to get made, but this is not how you're going to do it.
Right.
We also want you to not have to like fund most of the campaign yourself, because is that really a success?
Yeah. I always told people that if you need your mother to give you money and back your campaign, then the campaign's already failed, because your mother already supports your whatever you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Your mom's already going to want your project. So what's the point of catering to her?
Yeah, don't cater to mom, because mom's going to show up no matter what. My mother came to see me in a play where I cursed the entire time. It was literally about cursing for long stretches. And she came to see that play and was like, oh, it's very nice.
It was very interesting.
It's very
That's
creative.
how my grandparents are. My grandparents are, I think, very scandalized by most of the work that I do, but they're so proud of it nonetheless.
There you go. See, that's not who you need to pitch. You need to pitch. I always told people, think of a dude in his cubicle in Nebraska who always wanted to do something creative, but has this like job in insurance and is bored out of his goddamn mind and just desperately would love to do something creative, and is like, I can follow along this person who is risking their whole life falling apart and having no money. I'll give them $20 and then I'll keep my job in Nebraska.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So thank you so much for speaking to me.
Thanks so much for having me.
And yeah, so go to Seed and Spark, check out what they do. Go and have them take your Blippi show to them and be like, I want to make a Blippi podcast. Tell me what to do. Tell me how to do it. You might need permission from Blippi. I'm not sure how that works.
No, I don't think so. I think as long as you're not like fully ripping the audio from episodes.
It's fair use then, probably.
Yeah, it's fair use, baby. Oh, absolutely.
Beautiful. Beautiful. It's going to be great. I will not watch your Blippi podcast, but I encourage you to do it.
But will you listen to it?
I might.
You won't watch it, but you will listen to it. And that's the distinction you're holding strong to.
Yeah, I might be drunk when I do it, but I'll at least check it out.
As it was meant to be. A stretch goal is we'll send wine to all of the listeners of the podcast as well.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many state laws in violation there, but that's fine. Nobody will know.
Don't worry about it.
Put it in a flat rate box. Nobody will care.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
All right, so that was a discussion with Bri Castellini. Don't hit the buttons on the keyboard. From Seed and Spark, seedandspark.com. Go there. They have very great resources if you're trying to get your project off the ground. It doesn't have to be film anymore. And then Reese here is playing with his cars. And Reese, can you tell people we're supposed to – don't do that. We're supposed to tell people to subscribe. Can you say subscribe?
Yeah.
Subscribe. All right, we'll see you next time with I don't know. We'll see what we're talking to next time. You say bye?
Yeah. Bye. No, let's not go bye.
Yeah, you said bye already.